When we look at the map of Middle-earth, we see only names. But as the author of this channel, I see destinies there. Today, I want to guide you along a route the films never told us about. It will be a long road, but a captivating one. Stay close. Snow lay thick upon the shoulders of the lonely mountain, glinting silver beneath a pale winter sun. Smoke drifted lazily from the rebuilt forges of Erebor, and within its halls the ring of hammer upon anvil sang once more, the sound of a kingdom reborn. Yet for all its glory and gold, unease still lingered in the hearts of the dwarves. Word had come from the far north, whispers carried by ravens and wandering traders alike, that orcs were gathering once more in the shadows of Mount Gundabad. Dwalin, son of Fundin, stood upon the ramparts of the eastern wall and gazed toward that distant land. His beard was streaked with silver now, and the scars of old battles crossed his bald head like faint white lightning. Though peace had returned to Erebor, he had never forgotten the fire and chaos of the Battle of the Five Armies, nor the many companions who had fallen upon the slopes below. King Dain Ironfoot summoned him that same morning to the great hall. The king sat upon a seat of carven stone, sturdy as the mountain itself, his red beard gleaming in the lamplight. At his right hand stood Balin, his brother, ever wise and fair of speech. "Trouble stirs in the north," said Dain in a low, steady voice. "Gundabad grows restless once more. My scouts tell me that lights burn again upon its heights, and war drums echo in its deep places. I cannot send an army. Not yet. Erebor's walls are still being strengthened, and our allies of Dale and the Iron Hills must be warned. But someone must go. Someone swift, strong, and trusted." Balin's eyes turned toward Dwalin, and Dain gave a single nod. "You have led men into darker places," said the king. "Will you go, brother of Balin, and see with your own eyes what lurks behind Gundabad's walls?" Dwalin placed a fist upon his chest. "I will, my lord. If foul things gather there again, I shall bring you word, or their heads." Dain smiled grimly. "Take a small company, no more than 6. Keep to the shadows. We do not seek battle, only truth." And so it was decided. By the next dawn, Dwalin gathered his chosen company in the lower halls. Oin the healer, ever grumbling but steadfast, Fror and Lofar, young dwarves of the Iron Hills eager for glory, and 2 brothers from Dale, human scouts skilled in the ways of the wild. With them went Nar, an old veteran whose left eye was gone, but whose aim with a crossbow had never failed. They set forth as the sun rose, passing through the great gate and into the cold wind of the world beyond. The road wound northward through forests stripped bare by winter, across frozen rivers and through silent valleys. Ravens wheeled above them, as if sent by old friends. For many days they traveled thus, and though they saw no sign of enemy forces, they found traces enough, the ashes of campfires in caves, the trampled snow where heavy feet had marched, and once, upon a mountain pass, the broken haft of a goblin spear frozen in ice. At night they took shelter beneath overhanging rocks, and Dwalin sat awake while the others slept, sharpening his axe and listening to the wind. He felt it deep in his bones, the same heaviness that came before a storm. On the 9th day, they reached the Grey Mountains, where the land rose steep and cruel. Here they found an ancient stair carved into the rock, half buried by snow. Dwalin knelt beside it, brushing the frost away, revealing a rune mark once etched by dwarves of old. "This was our road long ago," he murmured. "The path that led from Erebor to the forges of Gundabad, before the orcs claimed it for their own." Oin spat. "Aye, and cursed be their claim. No dwarf should walk these ways unarmed." Dwalin smiled grimly. "Then it is well we are armed indeed." They pressed onward through narrow passes where the wind howled like wolves. The sky turned grey and bitter, and snow began to fall. By the 12th night, they reached a high ridge overlooking a vast, dark valley. There, in the distance, rose Mount Gundabad, black and cruel against the storm-lit sky, its peak wreathed in shadow. Faint fires flickered upon its slopes. The fortress of the orcs had awakened again. They found shelter in a ruined watchtower, once dwarven built, now half buried in ice. From there they could see the movement of torches winding through the valley, patrols and many of them. "It seems not a rabble," said Nar, lowering his crossbow. "They march in order, as soldiers would." Dwalin nodded, eyes narrowing. "Then they have a leader worth fearing." Balin's old words came to him. The north is never quiet long. As night deepened, a strange sound drifted on the wind, the beating of drums, slow and heavy, echoing from deep within Gundabad's heart. The company listened in silence, their breath misting in the cold air. "This is no mere gathering," said Dwalin at last. "They are forging for war." And as he gazed upon the fortress, grim determination hardened in his chest. The mountain had been a place of ruin once for his kind, and he would not see it rise again to threaten Erebor. "Rest while you may," he told his company. "Tomorrow we go closer." Outside, the storm gathered strength, and the dark drums continued to beat beneath the mountain's shadow. Morning broke grey and cold, the sun veiled behind a sky heavy with snow. The land around Mount Gundabad was silent, but for the keening of the wind through broken stones. Dwalin and his company moved out from the ruined tower at dawn, cloaked in furs and silence. Their breath smoked in the air as they descended toward the valley floor, following a narrow track worn long ago by dwarven boots and later defiled by orc feet. The valley was treacherous ground, sheer cliffs to one side and jagged ridges to the other. Below, a frozen river wound its way through the waste, its black ice glinting faintly under the pale light. Tracks crossed its surface, many tracks, heavy and deep. Dwalin crouched beside them, brushing the frost with his gloved hand. "Orcs," he muttered, "and not a few. See how the prints lie close together. They march in companies." Fror knelt beside him, his breath quick. "Then we should turn back and bring word to the king. This is an army, not a band of raiders." But Dwalin shook his head. "Not yet. If we return now, we bring only guesses. I must know their strength, and who commands them." Oin grumbled under his beard. "If we live long enough to tell it." They moved again, keeping low, crossing the ice one by one until they reached the far side. There they found a narrow cleft in the rock, half hidden by fallen snow, a path that wound upward into the foothills of Gundabad itself. By midday they reached the edge of a wide plateau overlooking the northern face of the mountain. The fortress stood before them in all its dark might, its gates of black iron rebuilt, the walls crawling with torchlight. Great furnaces burned within the hollows, and smoke poured from vents in the mountainside, staining the snow. Nar's one good eye narrowed. "They rebuild the forges. I can smell the metal on the wind. They're shaping weapons." Dwalin's jaw tightened. He counted the patrols along the walls, the watchtowers newly raised, and the figures moving in ordered ranks. Orcs, yes, but also taller shapes among them, men with strange armor and red banners bound to their spears. "Easterlings," whispered one of the men from Dale. "I have seen their kind before, in the east of Run." "Then the rumors were true," said Dwalin grimly. "The orcs have found allies." For hours they watched in silence, marking the entrances, the guard shifts, the patterns of movement. When night fell again, the company withdrew to a hollow among the rocks. They built no fire, eating cold rations and whispering their plans. "We cannot fight them all," said Lotr, his voice low. "Even a score of us could not breach those walls." "We do not need to fight them all," Dwalin replied. "We need only reach their heart. Somewhere inside those walls lies the hand that commands them, the one who gives them order and purpose. If we find him, we may end this before it begins." Oin frowned. "And how do you mean to enter a fortress swarming with orcs and men?" "Through the bones of the mountain itself," said Dwalin, his eyes gleaming. "Long ago, before the orcs took Gundabad, there were tunnels cut by our folk, secret ways for miners and messengers. Most have been sealed, but not all. If we find one, it will take us behind their walls." No one spoke for a time. The wind moaned around the stones. Then Nar gave a grunt. "There is one such path I remember from old tales, the underpass of Thrasdom. My grandfather spoke of it, a tunnel made for the dwarves who mined silver in these hills before the darkness came." Dwalin turned to him sharply. "Can you find it?" "If the mountain remembers me," Nar said. "Perhaps." They rested only a few hours. When the stars rose, they set out once more, circling the mountain's lower slopes. Snow fell in whispering veils, muffling their steps. Now and again they glimpsed the glow of torches far below, but none saw them. By midnight, Nar led them to a ravine hidden by an ancient rock slide. Beneath the stones, half buried in frost, they found a narrow doorway, dwarven work beyond any doubt, its lintel carved with runes nearly worn away. "Here," Nar whispered, "Thrasdom's gate." Dwalin brushed away the snow and traced the runes with a calloused hand. The words were old, almost forgotten. "In shadow, we pass unseen." He felt a shiver run through him, not of fear, but of memory. "May the fathers guard us," he murmured, and pushed the door. It groaned faintly but opened, revealing a tunnel that plunged into darkness. The air that drifted out was cold and stale, yet faintly tinged with the scent of old stone, the breath of dwarven halls long sealed. They lit their lanterns, their light dim and hooded, and entered. The passage sloped downward, rough and narrow, the marks of pick and hammer still visible on the walls. For a long while they walked in silence, the sound of their boots echoing softly. At times they passed through chambers where old tools lay rusted, or where veins of silver still glimmered faintly in the rock. Once they found bones, dwarven bones, shattered and blackened. "Orcs came this way once," said Fror quietly. "Aye," Dwalin replied, "but not again." Hours passed. The air grew warmer as they descended, and a dull, rhythmic sound began to reach their ears, the pounding of hammers, far away, yet unceasing. At last the tunnel ended in a wall of stone, cracked and half collapsed. Beyond it glowed a faint red light. "This is the end of the old mine," said Oin. "Beyond lies the new forge." Dwalin pressed his ear to the stone. He could hear voices, guttural, harsh, and the clang of metal. He drew back and looked to his company. "Make ready," he said. "We go behind the fortress wall." They worked quickly and silently, loosening the stones one by one until a gap opened large enough for a dwarf to crawl through. The heat grew stronger, and the air carried the stench of smoke and iron. Dwalin went first. He slid through the gap and emerged into a cavern lit by firelight. Below him lay a vast foundry, an underground hall filled with forges, bellows and chains. Orcs labored at anvils, beating red-hot blades into shape. Among them walked men clad in dark armor, bearing strange sigils upon their breastplates. At the far end of the hall, upon a black dais, stood a figure taller than the rest, an orc with a jagged helm and a great scar across his chest. Dwalin knew that mark. Morgash, he breathed, a captain of Bolg's army, thought slain at the Battle of the Five Armies. But Morgash lived. Dwalin's eyes hardened. He turned to his companions, whispering, "There lies our quarry. If Morgash commands here, then Gundabad's war has already begun." He motioned for silence. Together they crouched among the shadows, hidden by the roar of the forges, their hearts pounding like hammers in the deep. The enemy had returned to their ancient fortress, and Dwalin, son of Fundin, had followed them into its very heart. The forges roared like the throats of dragons, and the heat from them struck Dwalin's face as he crouched among the shadows. Sparks drifted through the air like fiery snowflakes, settling on chains, anvil, and stone. Morgash's voice, low and rasping, echoed through the foundry as he barked orders to his thralls. Orcs scuttled to obey, hauling cartloads of black ore and barrows of bones, their eyes gleaming yellow in the half-light. Hidden behind a line of broken pillars, Dwalin and his company watched in silence. They could not speak for fear of the echo. Even a whisper might bring death upon them. Only the glances of their eyes and the slow movement of their hands told their thoughts. At length, Dwalin gestured toward a narrow stair that wound upward at the far end of the hall. He had seen a shadow pass there, a doorway leading deeper into the fortress. Perhaps there, behind thick walls, lay the plans that could reveal Morgash's purpose. He motioned for Fror and Lofar to remain behind, watching their rear, and took Oin and the 2 men of Dale with him. Nar followed last, crossbow in hand, his steps light despite his years. They crept along the edge of the cavern, moving when the hammering drowned the sound of their boots. A sudden roar split the air, an orc overseer, striking down one of his own with a brand. The slain creature fell, writhing into the fire, and the smell of burning flesh filled the hall. For a moment, all eyes turned toward the commotion, and Dwalin seized it. He darted forward, sliding behind the base of the stair. The steps were steep and narrow, cut into the living rock. They climbed swiftly, keeping to the shadows. Halfway up, they passed a great iron door, its hinges smeared with pitch. Through its cracks came the smell of tar and oil and the faint sound of voices. Dwalin paused, pressing his ear to the cold metal. The speech beyond was harsh, but he caught words in the black tongue and in the common speech alike. Men were among them, Easterlings bargaining with Morgash's lieutenants. 3 moons, said a deep voice within. 3 moons, and the road to Dale shall burn. Erebor will fall, as it should have fallen before. Another voice, soft and cold, replied, "And what of your master's oath? The gold of the dwarves is promised to us." Dwalin's hand tightened around the haft of his axe. They were planning war, open war, and the Easterlings sought payment in gold, perhaps in slaves. He signaled Nar to mark the words, but before they could move on, a sound rose from below, a shout, sharp and alarmed. He turned. A figure had emerged from the lower level, an orc scout sniffing the air. His beady eyes caught the flicker of their lantern light. The creature hissed, drawing a blade. Dwalin leapt without thought. His axe flashed in the red gloom, and the orc fell with a choking cry, but the damage was done. The hall erupted with shouts. "Run!" Dwalin roared. The company surged up the stairs, boots clanging against stone. The forges below thundered louder as horns began to sound, deep and hateful. The company burst through the archway at the stair's end, finding themselves in a long passage lined with cracked statues, once proud dwarven kings, now defaced and smeared with black paint. From below came the pounding of many feet. "Which way?" cried Oin. Nar pointed to the left, where a faint draught stirred. "That way. The air moves there. It leads towards the upper halls." They ran, their shadows streaming behind them. The corridor twisted and climbed, past fallen doors and heaps of rubble. At last, they came to a chamber where the roof had split, revealing the pale gleam of the moon through a jagged hole. "We can go no further without light," said Dwalin, breathing hard. "Hold here." They formed a circle, weapons drawn. The men from Dale loosed arrows down the passage, striking the first of the orcs that appeared. Dwalin met the next head-on, his axe biting deep. The clang of battle rang through the hall, fierce and terrible. Yet they were too few. The orcs came in waves, shrieking, pressing them back toward the broken wall. Then from the side, a greater shadow moved. Morgash himself, helm gleaming, blade red as blood. "Dwarves!" he roared. "I thought your kind learned their lesson at Azanul Bizarre. You die in the dark once more." Dwalin met his charge with a cry of his own, the name of Fundin on his lips. Their weapons clashed, steel against steel, echoing through the ancient chamber. Morgash was strong, stronger than any orc Dwalin had faced. His blows rained like thunder, and his laughter rang with cruelty. But Dwalin was older, wiser, his arm steady as the mountain roots. He parried, stepped close, and drove the spike of his axe beneath Morgash's guard. The orc bellowed, reeling back, but before Dwalin could strike again, two more seized him from behind. The fight turned desperate. Arrows flew, blades flashed, and cries of pain filled the air. One of the men from Dale fell, pierced by a spear. Fror and Lothar came charging up the stair to aid them. But too late. The orcs swarmed like rats. Dwalin was forced to his knees, his arms bound with chains. Morgash staggered forward, clutching his wounded side, his eyes burning with hatred. "You will not die yet, dwarf," he growled. "You will live to see your mountain burn. I will make a banner from your beard and hang it from the gates of Gundabad." Dwalin spat blood at his feet. "You'll hang nothing but your own bones before this is done." Morgash struck him across the face with the flat of his blade. "Take them below," he ordered. "To the deep cells. The master will decide their fate." The company was dragged through winding corridors, their weapons torn away. Down they went, deeper than the forges, into the belly of the mountain, where water dripped from unseen heights. There they were thrown into a stone chamber, barred by iron. When the guards were gone, only the flicker of a dying torch remained. Oin pressed a hand to his side, grimacing. "We've failed, Dwalin. The message will never reach Erebor." But Dwalin lifted his head, eyes glinting in the dim light. "No. So long as one of us draws breath, it is not over. There is always a way out of stone, for those who know how to listen." He leaned his ear against the wall, feeling the faint hum within the rock, the whisper of air, the tremor of far-off water. "Yes," he said softly, "the mountain still remembers us." And in the darkness of Gundabad's dungeons, hope, faint but unbroken, stirred again. The darkness beneath Mount Gundabad was a living thing. It breathed cold upon the skin and whispered in the ears of the lost. In that black silence, Dwalin and his companions lay chained in their stone cell, their weapons gone, their wounds stiff with blood. Time passed without measure, hours or days. None could tell. The orcs came rarely, bringing foul water and scraps of meat that no dwarf would eat. They mocked their captives in broken common speech, promising torments to come when the master gave his word. But Dwalin's eyes never dulled. He sat against the wall, tracing faint lines in the dust with his bound hands, thinking, remembering. The mountain stones were old, older than the orcs who now ruled them. Somewhere deep within these roots were paths no goblin ever knew. tunnels cut by dwarven masons before the darkness fell. If he could find the breath of wind, the whisper of hidden air, then perhaps there was still hope. At length, Nar stirred beside him. "The wall behind you," he muttered. "Listen, there's a tremor in it. I felt it through the floor." Dwalin pressed his ear to the cold stone once more. Yes, there it was, a faint vibration, like the pulse of the deep earth. A trickle of air, steady and cold, brushed his cheek. He grunted softly. "There's a hollow beyond this wall, and a draught. The mountain hides a road yet." Oin gave a weary chuckle. "A fine thought, if we had aught but our fingers to dig with." "Then we shall use our fingers," Dwalin said. "Stone yields to those who do not rest." And so began their toil. When the guards left and silence returned, the dwarves pressed their hands to the wall, feeling the cracks, working loose the weaker stones one by one. It was slow, silent labor, the kind only dwarves could endure. The men of Dale, their spirits still unbroken, took turns standing watch by the bars, listening for the tramp of orc feet. As they worked, Dwalin spoke softly to them, of Erebor, of the golden halls, of the sound of hammer and anvil, of the clear streams that ran beneath the mountain. He told of Thorin Oakenshield, and of the battle where fire and shadow met on the slopes below Ravenhill. His voice steadied them all. "Do you know why we endure, brothers?" he said one night, his whisper low but strong. "Because the stone remembers us. The mountain does not forget its children. It will open when it knows our need." By the third night, their hands were raw and bleeding, but a space had begun to form. Small, narrow, but open. The faint breath of air was stronger now, carrying with it a scent of moss and running water. "That is no orc tunnel," Nar said quietly. "That is dwarven work, older than this foul fortress." Before they could speak further, the sound of boots came down the passage. The door grated open and torchlight flooded the cell. 2 orcs entered, dragging a chain between them. Behind them came a taller figure in black mail. A man, not an orc, his face pale as bone beneath a dark helm. He looked upon them with cold curiosity. "So these are the spies who crept beneath our walls," he said in a soft voice, touched with the accent of the East. "The master grows impatient to know their secrets." Dwalin stared up at him. "Tell your master he may come ask me himself, if he dares." The man smiled faintly. "Courage or folly? It makes little difference. The mountain will break you soon enough." He turned to leave, but paused. His gaze lingered on Dwalin's face, then upon the tattoos that curled along the dwarf's hands and wrists, old runes of war and kinship. Something flickered in his eyes, memory, perhaps, or recognition. He gave a short nod and spoke an order in his own tongue. The orcs seized Dwalin and hauled him to his feet. His companions cried out, but the guards struck them back. "Leave them," the man said. "Take only this one." Dwalin was dragged from the cell, his chains rattling. The door clanged shut behind him, and darkness swallowed his friends once more. They hauled him upward through twisting corridors, through chambers where forges blazed and slaves toiled in heat and smoke. At last they came to a high hall, lit by red torches. There, upon a dais of black stone, sat Morgash. His wound was bound in iron plates, his breath harsh, his eyes burning. "So," he growled, "the bearded worm lives. Tell me, dwarf, what brings a lord of Erebor crawling in my halls?" Dwalin met his gaze without flinching. "You know why, filth. You stir again what should have perished in the north." "I came to see the truth with my own eyes." Morgash rose, his laughter echoing off the walls. "Then see it you shall. The north belongs to the servants of the Eye. The dwarves will kneel, or their bones will feed the forges." He motioned to the man in the helm. "Show him." The man stepped forward, drawing aside a heavy curtain that hung along the wall. Behind it lay a great table of black iron. Upon it were spread maps: Erebor, Dale, the Iron Hills, all marked in red ink. Dwalin's heart sank as he beheld them. "Your king will soon have guests," said Morgash. "When the snows melt, we march south, my legions from Gundabad, and the Easterlings from beyond the Sea of Rhûn. Erebor will burn again." Dwalin spat at his feet. "You've not yet learned, it seems. The sons of Durin do not burn easily." Morgash struck him with a mailed hand. "Take him away. When the forge bell tolls thrice, bring him to the pits. We will see how loud his courage rings when the fire bites his flesh." The guards dragged Dwalin back through the halls, but as they neared the lower passages, a tremor ran through the stone beneath their feet. Dust rained from the ceiling. Somewhere in the depths, a muffled rumble sounded, like a gate forced open. The orcs froze, muttering. In that moment, Dwalin twisted, driving his shoulder into one guard and wrenching the chain from his wrists. With a shout, he seized the fallen orc's sword and struck down the other. The man in the black helm turned, reaching for his dagger, but Dwalin's blade flashed faster. The man staggered, clutching his arm. Yet his eyes held no hate, only a strange, fierce resolve. "Go," he hissed, "through the eastern door. The slaves there will aid you." Dwalin stared at him, startled. "Why, there is more than one kind of chain," the man said quietly, "and not all of us wear them for the same master." Before Dwalin could answer, the man turned and vanished into the smoke. He wasted no time. Grabbing the fallen keys, he ran down the corridor, heart pounding. The tremor came again, stronger now. From below rose the sound of shouting, orcs crying alarm. Dwalin reached the prison gate and flung it open. His companion stumbled out, blinking against the sudden light. "Up!" he barked. "The mountain moves for us. Now!" Together they fled through the lower passages. The draft led them back toward the wall they had labored to break. Beyond it, the tremor had split the stone wide, revealing a narrow fissure lit by a faint blue glow. Dwalin grinned grimly. The mountain keeps its promises. They slipped through the opening just as horns began to sound from above. Behind them, the walls cracked and the old cell collapsed in a rain of dust and stone. Ahead stretched a narrow tunnel, cold and wet, leading into the deep. They ran without rest, the sound of pursuit echoing behind them. When at last they stumbled into a vast cavern, they halted, gasping. Before them spread an underground lake, still and black, its surface broken only by the ripple of falling water. Oin raised the lantern, and its dim light gleamed upon ancient carvings along the walls, runes of the First Age, dwarven make, marking this as a refuge of the old kingdoms. Nar bowed his head. "We are in the hall of Thrasdam's Well," he whispered, "a sanctuary once built for miners who fled the wars of old." "Then we are safe, for now," Dwalin said. "But not for long. Gundabad's hosts will soon hunt the deep places." He turned his gaze toward the far shore, where a tunnel mouth glimmered faintly in the dark. "That road leads south," he said, "toward the high pass. If we can reach the open air, we can still bring warning to Erebor." He looked once more at the glowing water and the runes that shone faintly above it. "The mountain has shown mercy tonight. But mercy must be earned. Come, brothers, our road is not yet done." And with that, the company of Dwalin took up their arms once more, whatever they could find, and vanished into the shadowed tunnel, leaving the echo of their footfalls to fade beneath the mountain's endless stone. The tunnels of Gundabad wound downward first, then veered upward again, twisting like the roots of some monstrous tree beneath the earth. The air grew warmer, heavy with the scent of stone and water. Their small lantern flickered weakly, casting ghostly shadows along the walls. The sound of pursuit had faded, swallowed by the vastness of the deeps. But Dwalin knew the orcs would not abandon the hunt for long. They rested only when their legs could bear no more. The company sat upon cold stone, panting in the darkness. Their faces were grey with weariness and soot, their hands raw and bleeding from the climb. Still, Dwalin's eyes burned with resolve. "We've come farther than they'll think possible," he said quietly. "If we keep to the old ways, we can reach the high pass before dawn." Oin shook his head, his beard matted with grime. "Aye, if the old ways still hold. I fear these halls may not all be empty." His words proved true sooner than any wished. As they moved on again, the air grew colder, and a faint tremor ran through the ground. Somewhere ahead came the sound of water, rushing fast and strong, echoing like the beating of drums. They emerged into a broad cavern whose roof vanished in shadow. A stream ran swift across the floor, disappearing into a dark rift. On the far side, the tunnel continued, but a narrow bridge of stone, cracked and crumbling, was the only way across. Dwalin went first, testing the bridge with his boot. It groaned but held. One by one they followed, the men from Dale crossing last. Halfway over, a sound rose from the chasm below, a hiss, long and low, like steam escaping a forge. Then two pale lights opened in the dark, gliding upward. "By Durin's beard," Nar whispered, a shape uncoiled from the depths, a vast, sinuous thing, pale as old bone, with claws like iron hooks. Its eyes burned with cold fire. A creature of the deeps, no dragon, but some ancient spawn of Morgoth left to haunt these forgotten caverns. "Run!" Dwalin shouted. The bridge quaked as the beast struck, claws tearing into the stone. Fror leapt ahead, nearly falling as a slab cracked beneath him. Arrows flew from the men of Dale, hissing into the creature's hide, but it only reared higher, its maw opening in a shriek that shook the walls. Dwalin turned, swinging his axe as the beast's head lunged towards them. The blade bit deep, spraying dark ichor. The creature howled and recoiled, and in that heartbeat the company reached the far side. Dwalin was last. He dashed across as the bridge gave way behind him, crashing into the abyss. They stumbled into the tunnel beyond, gasping, hearts pounding. Oin spat on the ground. "By all the father's bones, what devil was that?" "Something that should have died before the first age ended," Dwalin answered grimly. "But evil roots deep in this place. Come, we dare not linger." They pressed on, the air now damp and thick with mist. The tremor of the creature's rage faded slowly behind them. Ahead, the tunnel widened once more into a grand hall, half-ruined but unmistakably dwarven in craft. Columns carved with runes lined the path, and upon the walls were faint traces of murals. Dwarves at labor, their forges blazing, their faces proud. Nar touched one of the carvings, his hand trembling. "These are of Durin's folk," he whispered. "Long before Erebor was raised, this place was once ours indeed. And ours it shall be again," Dwalin said. As they moved through the hall, they found the remains of an ancient camp, rusted tools, shattered helms, the bones of dwarves long fallen. Among them lay a chest of stone, its lid sealed with hardened wax. Dwalin knelt beside it, brushing away the dust. "Look here," he murmured. "The seal of Thrasdam's guild. These were the miners who built the tunnel. They died defending it." He pried open the lid. Inside lay bundles wrapped in oiled cloth, still dry despite the ages. Within were old maps, parchments, scrawled in Kuzdul, and a dagger of strange make, its hilt inlaid with mithril. Oin examined the maps by lantern light. "This shows the lower ways," he said. "There, see that mark, a vent to the upper air. If it yet stands, it might bring us close to the high pass." Dwalin smiled grimly. "Then the Fathers watch over us, still?" But before they could gather the relics, the sound of pursuit returned. Faint at first, then clearer. Orc voices echoing through the passages behind them. The hunters had found the trail. "Take what you can," Dwalin ordered. "We move." They fled through a side tunnel, the ancient map clutched in Oin's hand. The air grew thin and sharp, the slope turned upward. Behind them came the clamor of steel, the guttural roars of the enemy. At last they reached a shaft, where light, true light, gleamed faintly from above. A narrow stair wound along its edge, broken in places but climbable. "There!" cried Lotr. "The way out!" They climbed, grasping the jagged rock, pulling themselves upward. Stones shifted beneath their boots. Dust filled their lungs. The sound of pursuit grew louder still. Arrows whistled up from below, one striking the wall beside Dwalin's arm. "Keep climbing!" he roared. "Do not look back!" At the last stretch, the stair gave way entirely. Dwalin flung himself upward, catching the rim of the opening. Strong hands, Frors and Nars, seized his wrists and hauled him through. One by one the others followed, until all stood panting beneath a grey sky streaked with dawn. They were free. The wind struck their faces, cold, clean, and blessed. Before them stretched the northern slopes of Gundabad, vast and bleak beneath the morning sun. Behind them, the mountain's crown loomed dark, and from its vents rose thin plumes of smoke. "We live," said Oin, his voice half a laugh, half a sob. "For now," Dwalin answered. He turned to gaze back at the fortress below. Even from this distance, he could see the stir of movement. Orcs swarming like ants, horns sounding across the valley. "They'll not rest until they find us," Fror said. "Then we give them no trail," Dwalin replied. "We go south. The river Vale will hide us till we reach the long lake. From there, Dale, from Dale, Erebor." They descended into the wilds, following the stream that tumbled down from the mountain's flank. By nightfall they reached a ravine thick with pine and sheltering rock. There they rested at last, kindling a small fire hidden from sight. As the flames flickered, Dwalin drew forth the mithril-hilted dagger from the chest and laid it upon his knees. "This," he said softly, "is no common blade. It bears the mark of Durin's line. I would wager it was forged in Khazad-dûm itself." Nar nodded slowly. "Then we hold more than proof of war. We hold a memory of our fathers. The mountain itself guided us to it." Dwalin looked into the fire. "Aye, and I mean to see it brought home. Erebor must know what stirs in the north. Morgash lives, and he serves a darker power still." The company fell silent. Above them, the stars burned cold and distant. The wind sighed through the pines, carrying with it the faint echo of drums, far away but growing stronger. Dwalin stared into the night, his hand tight around the ancient blade. "Let them come," he murmured. "I have walked their halls and lived. The next time, it will be they who flee before the hammer of Durin's sons." And beneath the starlit sky of the north, the exiled company of Dwalin took their rest, blooded, unbowed, and bound for the kingdom of stone that awaited their warning. For 3 days and nights, Dwalin and his company journeyed south through the wilds, keeping to the hollows of the land and the shelter of dark pines. The air was bitter and thin, the snow deep in the hollows, and the wind carried strange voices from the north, echoes of horns and drums from Gundabad. The mountain loomed far behind them now, but its shadow seemed to follow wherever they went. Their provisions were meagre, for they had fled with little but their arms and the clothes upon their backs. The men from Dale hunted where they could, snaring a hare or bringing down a bird with bow and arrow, yet hunger gnawed at them all. Still, Dwalin drove them on, for he knew that if they did not outpace their pursuers, none would live to bring word to Erebor. On the fourth morning, as the sun rose pale above the ridges, they came upon a stream, half frozen and narrow, running southward through the folds of the hills. Dwalin knelt to drink, and as he did, he saw movement reflected in the water, a shadow among the trees. "Down!" he hissed, and they dropped at once, vanishing behind the rocks. A moment later, a company of orcs passed along the ridge above. Scouts, their armor blackened with pitch, their eyes red in the dawn. The dwarves held their breath as the creatures went by, muttering in their foul tongue. When at last they were gone, Dwalin rose slowly. "They hunt us still. Morgosh will not rest until he has our heads." Fror looked to the south. "If we keep to the river, we'll reach the valley of the Withered Heath in 2 days. From there, it's open country to the Long Lake." "Aye," said Dwalin, "but we must cross the heath by night. It's said that things creep there that even orcs avoid." And so they followed the stream, winding through crags and ravines. The sun climbed higher, glinting off the snow, and before long the land opened out, a vast expanse of barren hills, their slopes scarred by old fire. Smoke drifted faintly in places, and the air was thick with the smell of sulphur. "The Withered Heath," murmured Oin, "where dragons once nested. Let us pray none yet linger." They crossed by twilight, the land glowing faintly in the dying light. The stones beneath their feet were scorched black, and here and there lay the bones of great beasts, scaled ribs as long as a man's height, skulls with fangs like swords. The men from Dale walked in silence, awe and fear written on their faces. As night fell, they made camp within the shelter of a half-collapsed ridge. A small fire burned low, hidden from sight by rocks. The company sat close together, their faces weary. "We are hunted, starving, and cold," said Oin, rubbing his hands. "And yet you sit there, Dwalin, as if this were but a stroll to the market." Dwalin smiled faintly beneath his beard. "I have walked darker roads than this. The living hills of Gundabad are not so easily left behind. We must harden our hearts, or they will fail us before the end." Nar, who sat nearest the fire, turned suddenly, his good eye narrowing. "Listen," he whispered. The others froze. From the darkness beyond the rocks came a faint sound, a soft scraping, followed by the hiss of disturbed snow. Then silence. Dwalin rose slowly, axe in hand. "Something moves out there." Fror and Lofar drew their blades, and the men notched arrows. The night seemed to hold its breath. Then, with a rush of air, a shape burst from the shadows, a warg, black-furred and huge, its eyes gleaming with hate. It leapt at Dwalin, jaws snapping. The dwarf sidestepped and swung his axe in one swift motion. Steel met flesh, and the beast fell, its blood steaming on the frozen ground. Yet its death cry had barely faded when more came. 3, then 4, their howls rising like the wailing of ghosts. "Form a ring!" shouted Dwalin. The company closed ranks, back to back. Arrows flew, and blades flashed in the firelight. The wargs circled, striking from the dark. One of the men from Dale went down beneath their weight, crying out before he was dragged away into the shadows. The battle was fierce but short. When the last beast fell, silence returned, broken only by the harsh breathing of the survivors. Oin wiped his blade. They were scouts, he said grimly. "The orcs will follow their trail soon enough." Dwalin nodded. "Then we must move before dawn." They gathered what little they had and set out once more, the night wind biting at their faces. By the time the sun touched the peaks of the Iron Hills far to the east, the withered heath lay behind them, and the land grew softer, though still wild. Pines gave way to birch and holly, and the sound of running water grew louder. It was then, as they paused beside a shallow glen to rest, that Dwalin noticed something amiss. Lotr was gone. He turned sharply. "Where is Lotr?" No one answered. They searched the nearby brush, calling his name, but no reply came save the whisper of wind. Then Nar stooped and picked something from the ground, a scrap of cloth, torn and dark with blood. Oin cursed. He wandered in the night, perhaps, wounded in the fight and lost his way. Dwalin frowned deeply. No, he would not leave without a word. Something took him, or he went by his own will. The company's mood darkened. They moved on in silence, suspicion heavy in their hearts. By evening, clouds gathered over the western sky, and a storm rolled down from the hills. They found shelter beneath an overhang of stone. Rain fell in sheets, cold and hard, drumming on the earth. Within the narrow shelter, the company huddled close, their small fire flickering weakly. Dwalin sat apart, staring into the flames. The face of Morgash haunted him still. The scarred helm, the promise of vengeance. He thought of the man in black who had helped them escape, and of his strange words. Not all wear their chains for the same master. What had he meant? His thoughts were broken by a sudden sound, a snap of twig just beyond the firelight. He was on his feet in an instant, axe drawn. A figure stepped forward from the darkness, soaked with rain, face pale and drawn. It was Lotr. The company sprang to their feet, weapons raised. "Hold!" Dwalin commanded. "Lotr, where have you been?" The young dwarf lowered his gaze. "I was taken," he said hoarsely. "The wargs dragged me to their masters, orcs from Gundabad. They camp not far behind us, less than half a day's march. I escaped when the storm came." Dwalin's eyes narrowed. "And they let you go so easily?" Lotr shook his head. "No, I slew the guard and fled. By the time they find his body, we'll be far gone." He sank to the ground, trembling. Oin tended his wounds, but Dwalin's mind was troubled. He had known Lotr since the Iron Hills. Brave, loyal, yet something in his eyes now was changed. That night, Dwalin did not sleep. He sat with his back to the stone and watched Lotr through the wavering firelight. Once, near midnight, he saw the young dwarf stir, his hand reaching for something beneath his cloak, a small black pouch, glinting faintly when the fire flared. Dwalin said nothing, but his heart grew heavy. When dawn came, they set forth again, the storm gone and the sky clear. Ahead lay the plains that led to Dale and the long lake, but behind them the mountain's shadow stretched long, and from that darkness, unseen, a host was already on the march. Dwalin tightened his grip on his axe and looked southward. "One more march," he said softly. "One more day, and we shall see the mountain again. May the Valar grant we reach it in time." The wind carried no answer, only the faint echo of drums from far away, rolling through the cold northern hills. The morning came thin and grey, mist lying low upon the land like a veil. Dwalin's company moved swiftly through the shallow valleys that led toward the river running, though the wounds of battle and storm still weighed upon their limbs. The hills behind them fell away, and before them stretched the long green plains that lay north of Dale, open country but perilous, for there was little cover to hide them should enemies draw near. They had marched but a few hours when Nar halted, lifting a hand. The others froze. In the still air, the faint clang of distant metal carried across the plain, a sound that did not belong to bird or beast. "Orcs," Dwalin said quietly. "A war party, and not far behind." Owen cursed under his breath. "They follow faster than I thought." "Then we turn east," Dwalin said, "toward the woods of the Long Lake. The reeds and fog there will hide us, and from thence we can make for the river gate of Dale." They quickened their pace, their boots whispering through the grass. All day they pressed on, eating as they went, resting not at all. The land dipped and rose in gentle folds, the ground soft beneath melting snow. The pale sun sank slowly westward, staining the clouds with red. As they neared the edge of the lake country, the mist thickened, curling about their legs. The air grew damp, heavy with the scent of water and pine. At last they reached the marshy ground that bordered the lake's northern edge. Here they found a hollow among the reeds where they could rest, hidden from open sight. The company sank down in weary silence. Fror, who had taken a blow in the battle with the wargs, leaned against the reeds, pale but uncomplaining. Nar bound his wound with what little cloth they had left. Dwalin stood apart, gazing northward through the mist. Somewhere beyond those veiled hills lay Gundabad, black and brooding. He could almost feel its gaze upon his back. Oin joined him, muttering softly. "The young one sleeps," he said, nodding toward Lotr, who lay curled beside the fire. "You've watched him close these past nights. Do you mistrust him?" Dwalin did not answer at once. His eyes remained fixed on the northern horizon. "He was taken by the enemy," he said at last. "Few who fall into their hands return unchanged. Yet I would be glad to be wrong," Oin grunted. "So would I. But I've seen that look before, fear mixed with something darker. He keeps that pouch close to his breast like it holds his life." Dwalin nodded slowly. "Aye, and when the time comes, we shall see what life it truly holds." That night, the company took turns at watch. The mist drifted thick around them, muffling all sound. When it was Dwalin's turn, he sat beside the dying embers, his axe across his knees. The world seemed very still. Then, faintly, he heard it, the soft splash of a foot upon shallow water. He rose without sound, moving like a wolf through the reeds. A shape moved ahead, low and crouched. It turned for an instant, and Dwalin saw Lofar's pale face glimmer in the moonlight. The young dwarf was slipping away, his cloak wrapped tight. Something clutched beneath his arm. Dwalin's voice came low and sharp. "Lotr!" The figure froze. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then Lotr turned slowly, his eyes wide and fearful. I meant no harm," he stammered. "Then speak truth," Dwalin said. "What do you carry there?" Lotr hesitated, then drew forth the black pouch. "It is only a charm," he said. "They gave it me. The orcs. Said it would keep me safe from their hounds. I took it so I might flee them." Dwalin stepped closer. "And yet you hide it from your brothers." "Let me see it." The young dwarf's hand tightened on the pouch. "No!" he cried. And in that instant, Dwalin moved. He seized Lofar's wrist and tore the pouch free. The leather split beneath his grip, spilling its contents into the mud. A black shard of stone fell out, no larger than a coin, yet the air around it shivered with a strange chill. The mist seemed to draw inward toward it, and the fire at the camp's edge guttered low. Oin and the others, roused by the commotion, came running. "What is that?" Nar breathed. Dwalin's face was grim. "A seeing stone's splinter," he said slowly. "Not of the great Palantiri, but of something fouler, a servant's craft of Sauron's making. It was set in the forges of Gundabad to watch and to mark. Lotr sank to his knees, trembling. "I didn't know. They told me it would keep the beasts from my trail. I swear it." Dwalin looked down at him, his eyes filled with sorrow. "They marked you instead, lad. You have led them to us." Even as he spoke, a horn sounded far to the north, low and terrible. From the dark beyond the marsh came the crash of branches and the faint gleam of torches. "They come," said Nar, his voice hoarse. Dwalin stooped, seizing the black shard. "Then let this curse end here." He hurled it into the fire. There was a hiss like the scream of metal, and the flames shot high, green and white. A wave of heat struck them all, and the shard cracked in two, vanishing into ash. "Gather your gear," Dwalin roared. "To the lake. We make for Dale." They plunged through the reeds, water rising to their knees. Behind them, the torches drew nearer, and the harsh voices of orcs rang out across the marsh. Arrows hissed through the mist. One struck Fror in the shoulder, but he pressed on, teeth clenched. At last they reached the open water. A half-sunken boat lay among the reeds, old and half-rotten, but still afloat. They clambered aboard, pushing off with poles. The current took them, carrying them into the fog. The sounds of pursuit faded slowly, muffled by the mist. The company sat silent, their faces pale, their breath heavy. Dwalin watched the last glow of the fire vanish behind them, his heart heavy with loss. Lotr sat apart, weeping softly. Dwalin laid a hand upon his shoulder. "You were deceived," he said quietly. "But your warning has bought us life. Let that be your atonement." The young dwarf nodded, unable to speak. By dawn the mist began to thin, and before them rose the white walls of Dale, gleaming faintly in the morning light. Beyond it, the lonely mountain towered proud and golden under the rising sun. Oin gave a long sigh. "We are home." Dwalin looked upon the mountain, the halls of his kin, the heart of his people, and yet his joy was darkened by the shadow that followed them still. "Aye," he said, "home, but not safe. War walks behind us, and the north will burn again if Dain does not act swiftly." As they drifted toward the river gate, Dwalin gripped the haft of his axe. The road behind was ended, but the greater battle lay ahead. Gundabad was stirring, and he had seen its fire with his own eyes. He whispered a vow beneath his breath, old words of his house, Barazal and Khazad, until the last stone falls. And though the light of morning broke bright upon the land, in Dwalin's heart the drums of Gundabad still beat, deep and slow, calling him once more toward the shadow that had never truly been conquered. The gates of Dale rose before them like the promise of dawn, their silver-bound timbers gleaming in the misty light. The guards upon the walls were men of Bard's line, keen-eyed and wary, their spears bright beneath the morning sun. When they saw the worn company drawing near, half drowned and bloodied, a horn was sounded, and soon the gate opened to admit them. Within the city, all was bustle and light. Smoke curled from the forges, merchants cried their wares, and the sound of children's laughter echoed down the streets. Yet as Dwalin and his company crossed the stone bridge over the river, silence followed in their wake. The folk of Dale had not forgotten the battle of the 5 armies, nor the sight of dwarves returning from the north in such grim array. A captain of the guard stepped forward, a tall man with a scar upon his cheek and a cloak of blue trimmed with fur. He bowed low before Dwalin, for though the dwarf bore no crown, his name was known in Dale as one of Thorin's fiercest captains. "Lord Dwalin," said the captain, "word was sent to us by the ravens that you had gone north, but none thought to see you return so soon, or in such a state. What tidings do you bring?" "Tidings of war," Dwalin answered. Send messengers to your king, Bard's son, and to the halls of Erebor. Dying Ironfoot must hear this at once." The captain wasted no breath in question. He led them swiftly through the winding streets toward the great hall by the river's bend, where banners of green and gold hung from the rafters. King Brand, son of Bard the bowman, sat upon a chair of carved oak beneath the crest of Dale, a golden quiver and the crown of reeds. He rose as Dwalin entered, his eyes wide with concern. "By the valor, what has befallen you, friend of my father?" he said. "You come from the north. Does trouble stir again among the mountains?" Dwalin bowed low. "My lord king, the darkness that your father fought beside us has not perished. It sleeps beneath Gundabad, and now it wakes again." He spoke then of all that had passed, the fires upon the mountain, the orcs at the forges, Morgash's return, and the Black Alliance with the Easterlings. He told of their capture, their escape through the ancient tunnels, and the cursed shard carried unwittingly in their midst. The hall grew still as he spoke, the courtiers pale and silent. When he finished, Brand's face was grave. "You are certain of this?" he asked. "That they forge for war?" "As certain as I am of my own name," said Dwalin. "Their numbers are great, and their weapons many. When the snows melt, they will march, south first, to test our strength. If Erebor falls, Dale will not stand long." Brand nodded slowly. "Then the north must be warned. I will send riders to Esgaroth and to the Iron Hills. And you, Dwalin, will you return to Erebor and bear this news to your king?" "Aye," said Dwalin. "That is my road." Brand laid a hand upon his shoulder. "Then go swiftly. My men shall see you safely to the mountain gate." So it was that before the day's end, Dwalin and his weary company set forth once more, riding with the king's escort along the road that wound between the river running and the foot of Erebor. The sun was sinking when they saw the mountain at last, a vast shape of grey and gold rising against the reddened sky, its crown wreathed in mist. From its eastern gate came the glow of forges and the sound of hammers ringing deep within the stone. At the gate they were hailed by dwarven sentries, who led them at once to the throne hall. King Dain Ironfoot awaited them there, his red beard bound in silver rings, his helm resting upon the dais beside him. He rose as Dwalin entered, his eyes lighting with both relief and concern. "By Durin's beard, I feared you lost," he said. "What news from the north?" Then Dwalin told again all that he had seen, sparing no detail. When he spoke the name of Morgosh, a murmur ran through the gathered dwarves. Dain's face darkened. "I slew Bolg with my own hand at the Battle of the Five Armies," said the king. "Yet one of his captains lives still. This bodes ill indeed. And these Easterlings, did you see their banners?" "Aye," Dwalin answered, "red with a black circle. They came as envoys, but they left as allies. Their chieftains mean to strike when spring breaks the passes." Dain paced the hall, his boots ringing upon the stone. "Then we must not wait to be besieged. The forges must burn night and day. Every hammer in Erebor shall ring till the mountain sings with steel. If they march from Gundabad, we will meet them with iron and fire." He turned back to Dwalin. "You have done well, son of Fundin. Erebor owes you its life once again. Rest now, and heal your wounds. You shall have command of the first company when we march north." But Dwalin shook his head. "My king, I will rest when the work is done. Let me go among the smiths and the warriors. I will see the forges kindled myself." Dain smiled grimly. "So be it." And thus the halls of Erebor awoke once more to the sound of war. Forges that had lain quiet since the dragon's fall blazed with new fire. The ring of anvils echoed through the deeps, and the smell of hot iron filled the air. Day by day the stores of arms grew. Axes sharp as dragon teeth, shields of gleaming steel, mail as fine as woven silver. Dale too stirred to readiness. Its walls were strengthened, its archers drilled, and the river watched by vigilant sentries. Yet though the mountain seemed strong, unease lingered in Dwalin's heart. Each night, when the fires dimmed and the halls grew quiet, he would walk the outer walls and gaze northward. Sometimes, on the edge of sight, he fancied he saw a faint red glow where the snows lay thick upon Gundabad's peak. At other times he heard a rumble, distant yet deep, as if the mountain itself muttered in its sleep. One night, as he stood upon the rampart, Balin came to him, his white beard glinting in the starlight. "You do not rest, brother," he said softly. Dwalin shook his head. "The north stirs again, Balin. I feel it in the stone. Gundabad has slept too long. Evil grows there, and I fear it is not orc work alone. There is a will behind it, a shadow older than Morgash." Balin laid a hand upon his shoulder. "Then we will meet it together, as we have before. Dain is wise, and our allies are strong. We will not fall as we did in Moria." Dwalin's gaze did not leave the horizon. "Aye, perhaps, but the darkness does not always strike where we expect it." A sudden gust of wind swept down from the north, carrying with it a chill scent of ash and smoke. The torches along the wall flickered, and far away, across the plains, thunder rolled without storm. Balin frowned. A strange wind for a clear night. Dwalin's hand tightened upon the hilt of his axe. "Not strange," he said quietly. "A warning." Below them, the fires of Erebor burned bright, and the dwarves sang as they worked, songs of stone and forge, of hammers ringing in defiance of the dark. Yet above, upon the wind, there came faint and distant the beat of drums, slow, measured, and terrible, the drums of Gundabad. And Dwalin, hearing them, knew that the peace of the north had ended. The war of the mountains was about to begin. Winter deepened over the lands of the north, and the lonely mountain gleamed white with snow. Yet within its halls burned a fire that would not sleep. The forges of Erebor thundered day and night, their light spilling like molten gold through the vents in the mountainside. The clang of hammers echoed through every tunnel, and the song of the smiths rose with the smoke, proud, fierce, and steady as the heartbeat of stone. Dwalin walked among them, his face darkened with soot, his arms bare and strong as the day he first took up an axe. Though a lord among dwarves, he labored beside the smiths as one of them, shaping helms, testing blades, setting the rings of chainmail. He said little, but the fire in his eyes spoke louder than any command. Those who worked under his gaze found their arms strengthened and their spirits lifted, for Dwalin's resolve was iron. Yet even in those busy days, tidings came that darkened every heart. Messengers from Dale brought word that strange shapes had been seen moving along the northern ridges, lines of torches by night and plumes of smoke by day. Villages near the borders were found empty, their doors torn down, their forges cold. Tracks led north, and among them the mark of many iron-shod feet. When this was told to King Dain, he sent for Dwalin. They met in the war chamber beneath the mountain, where the map of the north was spread upon a great stone table, its surface carved with the valleys and rivers of the land. There stood Balin and Brand of Dale, and with them Glóin, stout and red-faced, who had returned from Esgaroth with tidings of his own. "The Eastern Watch reports the same," said Glóin, striking the table with his fist. "Raiding bands, swift and silent. They take prisoners where they can, and none return. King Dain's brow furrowed. This is no common war of orcs. They gather with purpose. Gundabad seeks vengeance, and the east marches beside them. Balin nodded gravely. And if they strike from both north and east, the Valley of Dale will bear the first blow. The city cannot withstand a siege without the mountain's aid. Brand straightened. You shall have it. Dale stands with Erebor, as my father stood with Thorin. Whatever comes, we face it together. Dwalin looked upon the map. His finger traced the path from Gundabad, down through the grey mountains and the withered heath. They will march here first, he said, pointing to the northern passes. If we hold them there, the plains will be safe. But if the pass falls, they will pour through like water. We must meet them before they reach the lowlands. Dain nodded. Then we march north to the gate of Nargath, where the old watchtower stands. You shall lead the vanguard, Dwalin. Take 2,000 of our best, steel and shield bearers, crossbows and axemen. I will follow with the main host. Dwalin bowed. It shall be done, my king. Within 3 days, the host of Erebor gathered upon the plain before the mountain. Snow fell in great silent flakes, yet the ground trembled beneath the march of iron-shod boots. Lines of warriors stretched from the gate to the riverbank, their armor bright as the sun on ice. The banners of Durin's house, black and gold, fluttered above them, and at their head rode Dwalin, grim and unyielding. Upon his helm was set a single white gem, the mark of his house, and in his hands he bore Barasgrunt, his ancient axe, forged anew in the fires of Erebor. From Dale came the archers of Brand, clad in green and brown, their longbows strung and ready. They joined the dwarves upon the march, their breath steaming in the cold air. Together they went north, following the river until it forked among the hills. Beyond lay the land of stone and wind, the high passes where no tree grew and the sun seldom shone. The journey was long and harsh. Snow blinded their path, and bitter winds tore at their cloaks. But Dwalin drove them on, for in his heart he felt the nearness of the enemy. At last, they came upon the gate of Nargath, a ruined tower built by dwarves in elder days to guard the northern road. Its walls were broken, but its bones were strong, and there they made their stand. By night they fortified the ruins, raising palisades and digging trenches. Fires burned low and hidden, and scouts were sent forth into the dark. From one of these returned the men of Dale, pale and shaken. "We have seen them," they said, "a host without end, marching by torchlight through the valley, orcs, trolls, and men from the east. They come as a black tide." Dwalin listened in silence. Then he looked to the horizon, where faint red glows danced upon the snow. "So it begins," he murmured. "The north burns again." Before dawn, the drums began, the same deep thunder he had heard beneath Gundabad. They rolled like the beating of a giant's heart, steady and relentless. The wind carried the smell of smoke and iron. Soon the first scouts appeared upon the ridge, small, twisted shapes moving against the whitening sky. Behind them came lines of spears, ranks upon ranks, stretching into the mist. Dwalin drew his axe. "Hold the line!" he cried. "Let no orc set foot past these stones." The first assault came at sunrise. Screaming, the orcs poured down the slope, black against the snow, their blades flashing red. The dwarves met them with a roar that shook the ground. Axes swung, hammers fell, and the clash of steel rang out across the pass. The archers of Dale loosed a rain of arrows, felling many before they reached the walls. But still they came. More and more, a sea of darkness crashing upon the stones. For hours they fought, the sun rising and setting in a haze of smoke. The snow ran red, and the air was thick with the stench of blood and fire. 3 times the enemy broke upon their line, and 3 times they were thrown back. Yet Dwalin knew it could not last. For every orc that fell, 2 more came behind. And among them he saw taller figures in black armor, men of the east, their banners blood-red with the mark of a serpent. At last, as night fell, the horns of Gundabad sounded once more. The assault ceased, and the enemy withdrew to the valley below. Dwalin stood upon the rampart, his beard matted with frost, his armor dented and scarred. He looked down upon the field strewn with the dead, and felt no triumph, only grim resolve. Balin came to him, limping from a wound. "They will come again at dawn," he said, "and with greater strength." Dwalin nodded. "Aye, but so will we. The king marches behind us with his host. If we can hold till he arrives, the mountain will stand." He looked to the north, where the fires of Gundabad's army flickered like stars fallen to the earth. The wind carried the faint echo of drums once more, slow and cold. "They have come for the sons of Durin," he said softly. "Then the sons of Durin shall answer." And beneath the falling snow, Dwalin raised his axe high, its blade catching the dim starlight. The weary host of Erebor and Dale saw him and lifted their voices in a single cry that rolled through the night, the battle chant of their fathers, born in Khazad-dûm and carried through the ages. "Baruch Khazad! Khazad Aimenu! Axes of the dwarves! The dwarves are upon you!" The cry echoed against the mountains, fierce and proud, and even the enemy paused to hear it. For in that sound was the memory of all that the dwarves had lost, and all they would yet defend. And when the first light of dawn crept over the ridge, Dwalin still stood upon the wall, unyielding, the last sentinel of the north, awaiting the storm to come. The dawn broke cold and red over the gate of Nargath. A pale light spread across the snow, revealing the dark host that filled the valley below. A sea of spears and banners, of armored beasts and grim-faced warriors. The drums of Gundabad beat slow and deep, their sound echoing like thunder through the mountain passes. Above them all rose the black standard of Morgash, the white hand painted crimson beneath the symbol of a broken crown. Dwalin stood upon the wall, his breath steaming in the frozen air, his hand resting upon the haft of his axe. Behind him, the dwarves of Erebor and the men of Dale made ready for battle, sharpening blades, tightening straps, setting arrows to string. The wounded were carried to the rear, their faces pale but proud. None spoke. The hour for words had passed. As the sun lifted over the eastern peaks, a horn sounded among the enemy ranks. Then the drums ceased, and silence fell, a silence heavy with waiting. From the midst of the host, a single figure rode forth upon a black wolf. Morgash himself, his scarred helm gleaming, his armor bound in plates of dark iron. He raised his sword and called out, his voice carrying across the valley. "Dwalin, son of Fundin," he cried, "come forth and face me, if you have the courage left of Durin's folk." Dwalin's eyes narrowed. "I have no words for filth," he muttered. Yet he climbed to the rampart's edge and answered in a voice that rang clear through the cold air. "Your master's shadow is long, but it shall not fall here. Go back to your holes while you yet live, or by Durin's beard, I'll see your head upon a spike before the day's end." Morgash laughed, the sound harsh as grinding stone. Brave words for one who hides behind walls. "When this day is done, I'll hang your beard from my banner." With that, he raised his sword, and the drums began anew. The valley erupted with sound and motion. Orcs surged forward in a black tide, their war cries echoing off the cliffs. Siege engines rolled from the rear ranks, their wheels crushing the frozen earth. Arrows darkened the sky. The dwarves met them with volleys of bolts from their crossbows, and the men of Dale loosed their arrows in deadly rhythm. The air was filled with the hiss and clang of iron upon iron. The first wave struck the outer palisade with a crash that shook the stones. Ladders were thrown against the walls, and snarling orcs climbed, hacking and clawing. Dwalin met them at the crest, his axe flashing in the morning light. One blow took the arm from a raider, another split a helm clean through. Around him, his warriors fought with grim determination, shouting the old war cries of Khazad-dûm. Again and again, the enemy came, and again they were cast down. But for every fallen orc, 3 more pressed forward, their bodies forming a mound against the walls. Then came the trolls, huge and grey-skinned, dragging chains and hurling stones that shattered the ramparts. One great boulder struck near Dwalin, sending a spray of rock and fire into the air. He staggered but did not fall. "Hold fast!" he roared. "The mountain stands with us." At his command, the dwarves unleashed their secret weapon. Barrels of oil and pitch rolled down the slope and set alight. Flames leapt high, engulfing the front ranks of the enemy. The smell of burning flesh filled the air. Still the drums beat on. By midday the snow was blackened and trampled, and the valley ran red with blood. Dwalin fought tireless as a machine of stone, his axe rising and falling without pause. When his arm grew numb, he changed grip and fought with the other. Around him the defenders cheered, for wherever he stood, the line held firm. At last, through the smoke, a new sound rose, the blare of distant horns, deep and golden. The dwarves lifted their heads, hope stirring in their hearts. "The king!" cried Balin. "King Dain comes!" Across the ridge to the south, the main host of Erebor appeared, banners unfurled, armor gleaming like molten bronze in the sun. At their head rode Dain Ironfoot upon a great war ram, his axe glittering like flame. With a thunderous roar, his army charged down the slope, striking the enemy's flank like a hammer upon an anvil. The tide turned. The orcs wavered under the sudden assault, their lines breaking. The men of Dale pressed forward, loosing arrows at the fleeing ranks. Dwalin saw his chance. "To me!" he shouted, his voice cutting through the din. "To Dwalin! For Erebor!" He leapt from the rampart, landing amidst the enemy. His axe swept in wide arcs, cutting a path through the throng. His warriors followed, their cries fierce and ringing. They drove deep into the heart of the host, where the banner of Morgash flew above the chaos. The orc captain turned to face him. "So, the worm crawls from his hole," he snarled. Dwalin's only answer was his axe. Their blades met with a clang that split the air. Morgash's strength was great, and sparks flew with every blow, but Dwalin's will was iron. They fought amidst fire and smoke, each strike shaking the ground. Around them the battle raged, but none dared come between. At last Morgash struck, his sword glancing off Dwalin's helm and biting deep into his shoulder. The dwarf stumbled, blood running down his arm. The orc raised his sword for the killing blow, but Dwalin, grim and unyielding, drove forward with a roar, burying his axe in Morgash's chest. The blade split armor and bone alike. The captain of Gundabad fell, his scream drowned by the roar of the dwarves. Dwalin wrenched free his weapon, standing over the body of his foe. "The sons of Durin do not bow," he cried. "Thus falls the scourge of Gundabad." The shout rolled across the battlefield. The orcs faltered, their courage broken. Some threw down their arms, others fled into the northern hills. The men of Dale and the dwarves of Erebor pressed them hard, driving them into rout. The drums of Gundabad fell silent at last. When the sun set, The field lay still. Smoke rose from the valley, and the snow was trampled to mud. Among the fallen walked Dwalin, weary and wounded, but unbroken. He found Balin beside a shattered cart, his arm bound, but his smile bright. "It is done," said Balin. "The day is ours." Dwalin looked northward, where the fires of the enemy still burned faintly in the distance. "Aye," he said, "but this was but one battle. The shadow that stirs in Gundabad is not yet slain. There is still work for the hammer and the axe." King Dain came then, his armor blackened with soot, his beard singed by flame. He clasped Dwalin's forearm in greeting. "You have done me proud, old friend," he said. "Durin's line endures, thanks to your courage." Dwalin bowed his head. "So long as one dwarf yet stands beneath the mountain, the north shall never fall." The king nodded. "Then let us bury our dead, and send word to Dale and the Iron Hills. The storm has passed, but we must be ready when it rises again." As night fell over the field of Nargarth, the survivors built great pyres for the fallen. Their songs rose into the cold air, low, deep, and filled with sorrow and pride. The flames flickered against the darkening sky, and Dwalin stood watching until the last spark died. Far to the north, beyond the reach of light, the fires of Gundabad glimmered faintly still, and in their depths, unseen, another will stirred, cold and ancient, whispering of vengeance yet to come. But for that night, the sons of Durin held their ground, and peace, though fragile, returned to the lands of the mountain. The snows melted slowly that year, heavy and stained with the smoke of battle. The valley of Nargath lay quiet beneath a pale sky, the scent of ash and steel still clinging to the wind. The dwarves of Erebor labored to bury their dead, piling stones upon the cairns of the fallen, while the men of Dale tended to the wounded and gathered what supplies they could from the ruin. The drums of Gundabad were silent, yet no joy filled the air, for all knew this victory had been bought dearly. Dwalin stood upon the ridge above the battlefield, his cloak torn and his shoulder bound with bandages. His eyes wandered across the plain where thousands had fought and died. Smoke curled from the funeral pyres below, carrying the scent of pitch and pine. At his side stood Balin, pale but smiling faintly. "You fought like the fire of Durin himself," Balin said softly. "Many owe their lives to you this day." Dwalin shook his head. Lives were lost enough. This was no triumph, only a reprieve. Morgash is dead, but the hand that moved him is still unseen. Balin nodded. "Aye, I fear the same. There was craft in this war, the kind no mere orc could muster. We must look deeper." Their talk was broken by the approach of King Dain, mounted upon his great war ram, his armor still black with soot. He dismounted slowly, limping from his wounds, and placed a hand upon Dwalin's arm. "My friend," said the king, "you have done what few could. Erebor stands because of your courage, and the passes are ours again. Yet I sense no ease in your heart." Dwalin bowed his head. "You are right, my lord. The enemy's purpose was not to conquer but to test. They sought our strength, to measure our readiness. And when they come again, it will be with greater force." Dain frowned deeply. "Then we shall be ready. Erebor's forges will burn till they rival the heart of the mountain itself. But you, Dwalin, you have earned your rest." "I will rest when peace is certain," said Dwalin. "Until then, I would see what lies beyond Gundabad's shadow. There are whispers among the captives, rumors of a power stirring in the deep places, something that commands both orc and man alike." Dain's gaze hardened. "You mean to go north again?" Dwalin nodded. "Aye, with a small company, quietly. If there is indeed another hand at work, I would see its face before it strikes again." The king was silent for a time, then sighed. "So be it. But take no more than you must. The mountain cannot afford to lose its mightiest again." That evening, beneath a cold red sunset, Dwalin chose his companions, Nar, the one-eyed veteran, Fror, who still bore scars from the first assault, and a young warrior of Dale named Edric, swift and keen of sight. Together they swore upon stone and steel to find the truth behind the shadow that lingered in the north. They set out at dawn, riding northward along the old road, past the ruins of the watchtower and the blackened fields. The world was quiet. Too quiet. No carrion birds circled the battlefield. No wolves prowled the hills. Even the wind seemed to whisper more softly. For 3 days they journeyed, following the valley where the enemy host had gathered. On the 4th night, they found what they sought, a trail of broken armor, discarded weapons, and signs of retreating feet leading toward the northern hills. "This road runs to the forges of Gundabad," Nar muttered. "If we follow it, we ride into the lair of the beast." Dwalin's eyes glinted in the starlight. "Then that is where we must go." They moved by night, keeping to the shadows. Twice they passed the corpses of great beasts, trolls burned by fire, their flesh blackened and twisted. Once they came upon a cleft in the rock where strange symbols had been carved, crude yet deliberate, circles and runes written in a black ash. Dwalin studied them in silence, tracing one with his gloved hand. "These marks are old," he said at last. "Older than Gundabad. The same craft that shaped the weapons we found in their forges. I have seen such runes once before, in the mines of Khazad-dûm, upon the walls where the nameless things dwell." Fror shivered. "You speak of the dark beneath the mountains?" "Aye," Dwalin answered, "and I fear it has found a voice again." The next night they reached the lower slopes of Gundabad itself. The fires that had once burned upon its peaks were gone, but a faint red glow lingered deep within its crevices, as if the mountain's heart still smouldered. They found a narrow tunnel hidden behind fallen stone, the same path Dwalin had used to escape once before. They entered cautiously, their lanterns dimmed. The air was thick and cold, and a faint vibration ran through the stone, like the breathing of some sleeping giant. The walls bore the marks of fresh work, tools, chains, and clawed hands. As they descended, the light from above vanished entirely. They came upon a vast cavern, and at its center stood a black altar carved from a single block of obsidian. Upon it lay a shattered helm, the helm of Morgash. Around it were scattered bones, and upon the walls words were scrawled in dark paint. "He who was servant shall rise again in the shadow of the eye." Edric crossed himself, muttering a prayer. "What madness is this?" Dwalin's face was grave. "It is not madness, it is a promise." Suddenly, a sound came from the darkness beyond the altar, a low chant, rising and falling like the hiss of serpents. Figures emerged from the gloom. Men, their faces painted black, their eyes fever-bright. They bore no weapons save daggers, and their voices joined in a single, dreadful cry. "Bolg's blood, Morgash's flame, the north shall burn for the eye's return." Dwalin raised his axe. So be it. The fight was swift and brutal. The fanatics rushed upon them, wild and fearless. Steel flashed in the dim light, and cries echoed through the cavern. Nar felled 2 with his crossbow before a blade found his leg. Fror struck down another, then fell beneath the weight of 3 more. Dwalin fought like a storm, his axe sweeping in great arcs, his voice rising in a roar that shook the stones. When at last the cavern fell silent, all the enemy lay dead. Dwalin knelt beside the altar, breathing hard. Blood dripped from his beard, mingling with the dark stains upon the floor. "It is worse than I feared," he said softly. "They serve no living master. They serve a memory, a will that lingers though its body is gone." Nar limped forward, clutching his wounded leg. "Then what hope have we?" "The same we have always had," Dwalin answered. "Stone endures, the mountain endures, and we endure." He struck the altar with his axe, splitting it clean in two. A gust of foul air rushed forth, scattering the ashes that lay upon it. The red glow within the chamber flickered and died. By dawn they emerged once more into the cold northern air. The wind howled down from the peaks, carrying the smell of snow and freedom. Behind them, Gundabad lay silent, its fires quenched for the first time in many ages. Dwalin turned southward, his face grim but resolute. "We have seen the truth," he said. "Now the king must know it. This war is not of orcs alone. It is the echo of a greater darkness. The North will need every hammer and heart before the end." And so they began the long road home, their shadows stretching before them in the pale morning light, while far behind, deep within the roots of the mountain, something stirred once more, a whisper like the sigh of buried fire, waiting to waken again. Snow fell again upon the lonely mountain when Dwalin returned. It drifted softly over the battlements, cloaking the stones in white, yet within the halls the forges still blazed, and the song of hammer and anvil echoed as ever. Messengers had already brought word of Dwalin's coming, and when he reached the gate, the guards bowed low, for they saw the weariness in his step and the shadow in his eyes. He rode straight to the great hall, where King Dain sat upon his throne of carven stone. Balin was with him, as were Glóin and Brand of Dale. The torches burned low, and the air was heavy with the scent of oil and iron. When Dwalin entered, all talk ceased. The king rose at once. "Welcome home, my friend," he said, though his voice was grave. "You have gone where few would dare. What did you find in the ashes of Gundabad?" Dwalin bowed deeply, then laid upon the table a helm, blackened, cracked, and rimmed with blood. "We found this, my lord, and worse besides. The enemy we fought was not driven by command alone, but by worship. Morgash was not their master. He was their priest. They served a will that has no flesh, only shadow, and that shadow waits still beneath the earth." The king frowned, his eyes narrowing. "Speak plainly. What shadow?" Dwalin drew a long breath. "A remnant of the great eye, a spirit broken but not gone, whispering to those who dwell in darkness. The orcs of Gundabad, the men of the east, they follow that voice. They call it by many names, but it is one and the same. The will of Sauron lingers still." A murmur ran through the chamber. Brand's face paled. "But Sauron fell when the ring was destroyed. The great kings of the west saw his end." "His body perished," Dwalin said, "but not his malice. It seeps into weak hearts and forgotten places as poison seeps through stone. We found runes in Gundabad older than any known tongue, markings that spoke of return and reckoning. They believe the north shall burn, and the dwarves first among all." The king's face darkened. "Then the peace we have known is but an ember in the wind. Erebor must be fortified anew." "Aye," Dwalin answered. "But we cannot stand alone. The north must unite, or all will fall separately." At this, Brand nodded firmly. "Dale stands with the dwarves, as always. I will send riders to Esgaroth, to the men who dwell by the lake, and to the wood elves of the forest. If there is danger brewing in the north, it threatens us all." Glóin stroked his beard. "The elves are proud and slow to trust, but perhaps they will listen." Thranduil is not blind to shadow. King Dain turned to Dwalin. You have borne the burden of war enough times, my friend. Yet I would ask one more service of you. Go as my voice to Thranduil's halls. Let him hear this warning from one who has seen the darkness with his own eyes. Dwalin inclined his head. I will go, but I would not travel alone. Balin and Nar will ride with me, if they are willing. Balin smiled. You could not keep me from it, brother. The road to Mirkwood is shorter than that to Gundabad, though no less perilous. So it was agreed. Preparations were made, and within 3 days the 3 dwarves set out eastward along the river. Winter's grip had not yet loosened, and the air was sharp as glass. The sun hung pale in a sky of steel, and the land lay silent beneath its thin light. Yet Dwalin took comfort in the sound of the water beside them, and the strength of his companion's steps. As they rode, they passed the ruins of Old Dale, blackened stones and empty towers now half buried by snow. Dwalin paused there a while, gazing at the remains. I fought here once, he murmured. The stones remember blood, even when the years forget. Balin laid a hand upon his shoulder. Then let us make a new memory for them, a memory of peace, if peace can yet be won. They travelled on, and by the 5th day they reached the edge of Mirkwood. The forest stood vast and dark before them, its trees tall as pillars, their branches woven thick overhead. Mist clung to the roots, and the air smelled of moss and old rain. At the border they were met by elven sentries, silent figures cloaked in green and grey. Their leader stepped forward, tall and fair, his hair bound in a silver clasp. You are far from your mountain, sons of Durin, he said. What business brings you to the King's Wood? We come by the will of Dain Ironfoot, Dwalin answered. We bear tidings for Thranduil himself, concerning matters that touch all the free folk of the north. The elf studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Follow me. They were led along winding paths beneath the trees. Strange lights flickered in the distance, and the air grew warmer as they went. At last they came to the Elven King's halls, a network of vast caverns filled with a soft golden glow. The sound of harps drifted through the air, and the scent of pine and wine mingled in the stillness. Thranduil sat upon his throne of carved wood, his crown of leaves gleaming faintly. He regarded the dwarves with a cool but not unfriendly gaze. You bring word from Erebor, he said. Speak and be heard. Dwalin stepped forward, bowing low. My lord, the peace that has long guarded our lands is failing. The orcs of Gundabad stir once more, and not by their own hand. We have seen their forges and their altars. A dark will guides them still, a shadow from the east, though the body of that darkness is gone. The Elven King's eyes narrowed. You speak of Sauron. Aye, Dwalin said. His spirit lingers, scattered but not dead. His voice stirs in the hearts of the wicked. If we do not stand together, the north will burn before spring's end. For a long time Thranduil was silent. Then he rose, his cloak rustling softly. I have felt a change in the air, he said at last. The creatures of the forest grow restless. Even the great spiders have fled deeper into shadow. Perhaps your words ring true. He looked down upon Dwalin with something like respect. Tell your king this. If the fire of Gundabad rises again, the elves of the woodland realm will not stand idle. The shadow threatens us all, and we shall meet it together. Dwalin bowed again. Your word will hearten my people. Then go swiftly, said Thranduil, and may the light of the stars guard your road. That night the dwarves rested within the halls of the wood elves, treated with the honor due to envoys of Erebor. Yet Dwalin did not sleep. He stood upon a high balcony, gazing through the branches toward the east, where the sky was dark and still. Balin joined him, his white beard glimmering faintly in the starlight. "Do you trust his promise?" "I trust the need that binds us," Dwalin answered. "Fear makes allies of many." Balin nodded. "Then let us hope that fear is enough." Dwalin looked again toward the east. Far beyond the forest, beyond the mountains, he thought he saw a faint red gleam upon the horizon, like the last ember of a dying forge. "The north is not finished with fire," he said quietly. "But neither are we." And when dawn came, he and his companions took the road once more, bearing with them the first spark of unity in a world that trembled once again on the edge of shadow. The wind off the long lake carried the chill of early spring as Dwalin and his companions rode south. The snows had begun to melt, and the waters of the river running swelled with ice and silt roaring down from the mountains. The road that followed its banks was muddy and treacherous, but the dwarves pressed on, their hearts strengthened by the promise of alliance. Thranduil's word had kindled a spark of hope. Small, perhaps, but in these dark times, even the smallest light was precious. Balin rode beside Dwalin, his white beard braided and tucked into his cloak. "It has been many years since elves and dwarves spoke without anger," he said quietly. "Perhaps the world is not so old that new friendship cannot be forged." Dwalin grunted in agreement. "Aye, though friendship born of fear is fragile, still it will hold long enough for steel to meet steel. That is all we need." Behind them, Nar muttered to himself as he checked the edge of his axe for the 100th time. "If the elves keep their word, we may yet live to see peace again, but I'll trust an elf's promise only when I see him on the battlefield, not before." They rode for 5 days before reaching the shores of the long lake. The town of Esgaroth had been rebuilt since the days of Smaug's ruin. Its wooden piers stretched far into the water, glimmering with lanterns. The smell of pine resin and fresh-cut timber filled the air. Boats drifted upon the lake's surface, their reflections quivering in the starlight. Yet beneath that calm, Dwalin felt unease. Soldiers patrolled the piers, and their faces were drawn with weariness. When the dwarves approached, they were met by a man in mail, his cloak heavy with rain. "You are far from your mountain, friends," he said warily. "What brings Dain's folk to Esgaroth?" "We bear a message for your lord," said Dwalin. "The king of the mountain calls for counsel, for war brews again in the north." The man's eyes widened, and he wasted no time leading them to the central hall, a great timber structure built upon tall piles above the water. Inside, torches burned bright, casting long shadows upon the walls. There, seated at the end of a carved oak table, was the master of Esgaroth, a broad-shouldered man with grey in his beard and the look of one used to command. He rose as the dwarves entered. "Welcome, sons of Durin. I am Ulrich, son of Bard's captain. The tales of your valor reach even our distant ears. What tidings do you bring from Erebor?" Dwalin bowed slightly. "Grim tidings, my lord. The orcs of Gundabad rise again under the whisper of an old evil. The battle at Nargarth Gate was but their first test. Erebor and Dale prepare for war, and the Elven King himself has pledged to stand with us. We come seeking the same of you." The hall fell silent. Then Ulrich nodded slowly. "We have seen strange things of late," he said. "Boats lost upon the northern currents, smoke on the far horizon. There are whispers among the fishermen of shapes, moving beneath the water. Shapes with eyes that burn like coals." He leaned forward, his expression grave. "If war is coming, the lake cannot stand apart. You shall have our aid." At those words, a weight lifted from Dwalin's heart. "Then the north stands together once more," he said. "Erebor, Dale, the woodland realm, and Esgaroth. all bound by one cause. May it hold, Alric replied, for if the darkness rises again, it will find us ready. That night the dwarves were given rest and food. The people of Esgaroth treated them with honor, offering ale, warm bread, and smoked fish. Dwalin sat apart at the edge of the pier, looking out over the moonlit lake. The water was still, save for ripples that moved like faint breaths across its surface. He could almost imagine the reflection of Gundabad's peak burning far to the north. Balin joined him, carrying a lantern. "You watch too much, brother," he said gently. "You'll see phantoms where none are." "I have seen too many phantoms become real," Dwalin replied. "Peace sits uneasy upon me. The air feels wrong, heavy, as if a storm gathers where no clouds are." Balin followed his gaze. The lake's surface seemed to shimmer strangely in the moonlight. For a moment, neither spoke. Then, faintly, they heard it. The echo of drums, far away, carried by the water. They rose at once. "That sound again," Dwalin said. "It follows us even here." The next morning, they took leave of Esgaroth, riding eastward toward the Iron Hills. There, the dwarves of Dain's kin still mined deep and kept strong their armies. The journey was long and lonely, through open plains and rolling hills dusted with snow. Twice they saw signs of passage, tracks of many feet, heavy and uneven. Orc trails. By dusk of the third day, they reached the foothills of the Iron Mountains. Smoke rose from the forges below, and the clang of hammers carried faintly upon the wind. Dwalin's heart lifted at the sound. It was the song of his people, unbroken by war or shadow. The guards at the gate recognized him at once and led them before Lord Borin, kin of Dain and warden of the Iron Hills. Borin greeted them warmly. "It is good to see you alive, old friend. Word of the battle reached us, though not the victory. I had feared the worst." "You would not have been wrong to fear," said Dwalin, "but the mountain stands. Still the threat grows. We come to ask for your strength. Gundabad's legions have not been destroyed. They gather again, and worse, forces stir behind them." Borin's expression hardened. "Then you shall have our axes. The Iron Hills owe their safety to Erebor, and we do not forget old debts. But tell me truly, Dwalin, do you think this war will end as the last one did?" Dwalin looked into the fire burning in the hearth. "No," he said at length. "This war will end only when the shadow that commands it is broken forever, and I fear it lies deeper than any of us can reach." That night, the halls of the Iron Hills rang with the sound of forging, steel meeting steel, as though the mountain itself had joined their labor. Dwarves gathered from every hall, their forges kindling new fire against the coming dark. Later, Dwalin stood upon the parapet, gazing northward. The sky there was black and starless, though no storm clouds could be seen. A faint red glow pulsed upon the horizon, the same he had seen from the Elven King's halls. "It spreads," he murmured. Balin stepped beside him. "Aye, like fire beneath the earth." Dwalin's grip tightened on his axe. "Then let the mountains answer with thunder." When dawn came, the first companies of the Iron Hills stood ready to march. Word was sent to Dale and Erebor. Messengers flew by Raven to Thranduil's realm, and to the scattered settlements of men along the lake. Across the north, the call was raised. The north was arming, and yet, as Dwalin looked upon the sunrise, its light seemed dimmed, as though filtered through smoke unseen. Somewhere beyond the mountains, beyond all sight, a whisper stirred like the memory of an old voice, a voice once heard in Mordor, and now rising anew. The wind carried the faint scent of iron and ash. The world was moving again, as it had in ages past, and Dwalin, son of Fundin, felt in his heart that this time the battle would not be for the north alone, but for all that still lived beneath the sun. The wind of spring carried no warmth that year. It swept over the plains of Dale and the blackened snows of Nargath, howling like the cry of ghosts. Far in the north, beneath the jagged crown of Mount Gundabad, a fire flickered once more, dark, unholy, and hungry. The watchers on the mountain's edge saw it from afar, a glow like a wound upon the horizon, and they sent their ravens winging toward Erebor. Dwalin stood upon the ramparts of the lonely mountain when the first of those ravens arrived. Its feathers were singed, and its call was harsh with fear. He took the message from its leg and read it by the forge light. When he was done, he looked northward, his face grim as carved stone. "They come," he said simply. The king's council met before dawn in the great hall of Erebor. Dain Ironfoot sat at the head of the table, his helm beside him, his eyes weary but bright. Around him stood Balin, Glowin, Brand of Dale, and messengers from the woodland realm and the Iron Hills. All faces were grave. "The fire has rekindled," Dwalin said, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Gundabad is awake again, and worse, something beneath it moves. Not orcs alone this time, but creatures of the deep. I felt them stirring even when I walked the tunnels. It is no mere army. The mountain itself fights against us." Silence followed his words, broken only by the crackle of the torches. Then Brand of Dale spoke. "If we wait for them to reach the valley, we'll fight with our backs to the river. We must march north while we still have strength." "Aye," said Dwalin. "Strike before they spread like rot across the land. Burn them in their lair, as our fathers once did." King Dain nodded slowly. "So it shall be. The armies of the north shall march together. The Elven King has sent word. His hosts move already through the forest paths. The Iron Hills send 500 hammers to our aid, and Dale will ride beside them. By week's end, we meet at the plain of Tharkun's Ford. There we join and turn north as one." So the banners of stone, leaf, and river rose again beneath the sky of Middle-earth. Across the wide lands the hosts gathered, dwarves in gleaming mail, men bearing longbows and bright helms, elves in armor of green and silver. The sound of their march echoed like distant thunder, and even the beasts of the wild fled before them. The north had not seen such a host since the days of old. When at last they reached the ford, the three kings met beneath the banner of Erebor. Dain clasped hands with Brand and Thranduil, and for the first time in many ages, no shadow of mistrust lay between them. "Let it be said," Dwalin declared, "that when darkness rose again, the children of the north stood as brothers." At that, the horns were blown, and the army turned its face toward Gundabad. They marched for 3 days through fields of ash and snow, where no bird sang and no grass grew. Each night the sky burned faintly in the north, a red shimmer like the breath of some slumbering beast. On the 4th morning, they saw it, the mountain itself, black and cruel, rising from the waste. Smoke poured from its vents, and the air was heavy with the stench of brimstone. At its foot, the plain was crawling with movement, orcs by the thousands, banners of red and black snapping in the wind, and behind them, monstrous shapes that moved like living shadow. Dwalin felt his heart harden. "There lies our doom or our deliverance," he said. "Let the mountain tremble before us now." The armies arrayed themselves upon the plain. Dain's dwarves formed the center, shields locked, axes ready. To their right stood the archers of Dale. To their left, the elves of the woodland realm, their ranks gleaming like frost. When all was silent, the king of the mountain raised his axe to the sky. Baruch Kazad, cried Dain, and from thousands of throats came the answering roar. Kazad Aimenu, axes of the dwarves! The dwarves are upon you! The cry rolled across the plain like a storm wind, and the enemy answered with a roar of its own. The drums of Gundabad beat, and the black tide began to move. The first clash came at midday. Arrows filled the sky, dark as a swarm of locusts. The elves loosed in return, their shafts falling like rain upon the orcs below. Then the two hosts met in a thunder of iron and flesh. Dwalin was in the forefront, his axe, Barazgrund, flashing like lightning. He hewed through the first ranks, his beard and armor splashed with blood and ash. Around him, the dwarves fought in tight circles, singing as they slew, their voices grim and deep. For hours the battle raged. The orcs came in endless waves, driven by a will that did not tire. Trolls broke against the dwarven line, battering shields and hurling stones, yet still they held. The elves loosed volley after volley, their arrows glimmering like starlight in the smoke. The men of Dale fought with fierce courage, their blades shining red in the sun. But as dusk fell, a tremor shook the ground. The enemy ranks parted, and from the mouth of Gundabad itself emerged a shape vast and terrible, a creature of the deeps, born of fire and shadow, its eyes burning like coals in a forge. It roared, and the very mountain answered. "A Belrog!" shouted Nar, his face pale. "By the Maker, they have woken a Bolrog!" Panic rippled through the ranks. The creature swept its whip of flame, and where it struck, armor melted, and stone split. The dwarves staggered, the elves faltered, and for a moment all seemed lost. Then Dwalin stepped forward. "Hold!" he bellowed. "It bleeds and burns as all things do, with me, sons of Durin!" He charged, his axe blazing red in the firelight. Behind him came 100 dwarves, their voices rising in a terrible chant. They fell upon the creature's legs, hacking at its tendons, striking through the flame. The beast roared in fury, striking out with its whip, but Dwalin pressed on, heedless of the heat. "Back to the dark with you," he shouted. "This is the land of the living, and we give it not to flame or shadow." With one mighty blow he drove Barazgrund deep into the creature's chest. Fire burst forth in a great plume, and the Balrog staggered, falling back toward the chasm whence it came. Its death cry echoed through the mountains, and the ground shuddered as it fell. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the armies of the north surged forward with renewed fury. The orcs broke and fled, casting down their arms, their courage shattered with their master's fall. The plain became a sea of flight and flame as the sons of Durin drove them north, scattering them into the wild. When the sun rose the next morning, the field was quiet. Smoke drifted from the broken gates of Gundabad. Dwalin stood before them, his armor scorched, his face blackened with soot. In his hand he held the haft of his shattered axe. The blade melted away. Balin came to him and laid a hand upon his shoulder. "It is done, brother. The mountain is free again." Dwalin looked toward the rising sun. "Free, for now. But the shadow never dies. It only sleeps. Let it sleep long, then." King Dain and Thranduil joined them, their faces lit by the pale morning light. Brand of Dale stood beside them, his sword red to the hilt. Together they gazed upon the ruins of Gundabad, and for the first time in many ages, the wind that blew from its heights carried no stench of smoke or blood, only the clean scent of new snow. "The north is safe," Dain said quietly, "and the price was worthy of song." Dwalin nodded. "Then let it be sung, not of kings, but of all who stood and did not fall." That night, beneath the stars, the armies of the north raised their voices in a single song, a song of victory and mourning, of stone and fire, of those who fought so that the mountains might stand unshadowed again. The flames of their campfires gleamed upon the peaks, and their echoes rolled far across the lands of Middle-earth. And when at last the fires dimmed and silence returned, Dwalin walked alone to the gates of the dead mountain. He laid the remains of his axe upon the ground and spoke softly. For every friend who fell, and every brother who endures, the North remembers. Then he turned his face south toward Erebor and the long road home.
Ось і завершився наш підхід до темних схилів Гундабату. Ця історія – моя спроба зазирнути трохи далі за фінальні титри Хобіта. Адже Толкін завжди нагадував нам одну важливу річ. Зло ніколи не зникає остаточно. Воно лише засинає, чекаючи, поки пильність світу ослабне. Двалін для мене – це втілення тієї самої старої гвардії, яка не вміє жити у спокої, бо знає ціну миру. Він камінь, який розбиває хвилі темряви. Мені хотілося показати його саме таким, не просто воїном, а хранителем пам'яті свого народу. Тож, друзі, вибачте, що я розмовляю зараз на українській, мені так трошки зручніше, але всі історії для вас ми перекладаємо і озвучуємо англійською, для того, щоб ви всі могли їх розуміти. Дякую за увагу, підписуйтесь на мене, ставте лайк, вподобайку, до нових історій.